Shalom Aleichem, Erev Tov, good evening. We are together in the writings of Rabbi Chaim David Halevy on Jewish national law, Mishpat Tzedek. There's a very slight chance that last week's shiur did not get recorded properly, and I will only know later tonight, B'ezrat Hashem, in the case you are watching this shiur and you missed last week's shiur. So those of you who were here, you were here, and those of you who weren't, B'ezrat Hashem, we'll find another time to review Torah together. Last week, we tried our best to begin the explanation of how you can have a functional Jewish state that also doesn't only function according to halakha, but also allows for other areas that are required for public well-being, for the needs of society to be met. By the way, tonight's shiur is dedicated for the refuah shlema of Miriam Tzipora bat Rachel and Matan Ephraim ben Netanel Rachel, my dear friend Harav Yaakov ben Chana, as well as Yaakov ben Farach, which have refuah shlema b'ezrat Hashem. And I wanted perhaps today to show you some of the limitations that exist in halakha, and I want to continue with the definition of the Ran as we discussed previously, which is there are two types of Jewish law. Those Jewish laws that are intended to connect between us and the divine, and that's going to be all the categories of law that have to do with more religious sides of life, tefillin, Shabbat, mezuzah, kashrut, those kind of things. And the halachot that are dedicated to the betterment of society or the operation of a just, moral, and upright society. We're dealing with the second half of those halachot. And in general, I think the Rambam explained it best when he discusses in the Moreh Nevuchim that the laws between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu are intended to help us cling to the divine, or have the divine cling to us, however you wish to look at that. The mitzvot ben adam lechavero, between us and other people, are intended to fix society and make that society a better place. Let's look together in the first chapter of the laws of murder, or murderers, and preservation of life. So, if you want to go to Sefaria, you'll find in the book of I don't know how they translate it, rotzach, maybe murderers and preventing the loss of life or saving a life. Look for that book of the Mishneh Torah. Let's read together from the first chapter. I want to examine these halachot together so that we can get a bit of an understanding of, one, some of the limitations of halakha, and some of the places where halakha recognized its own limitations and therefore allowed us to fill in the blanks with other things. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol niyeh. For those of you who have not studied pure Rambam with me, let's get ready, do it together. B'ezrat Hashem. Says Rabbeinu Rambam in the first chapter, the first halakha of the laws of murderers. Kol horeg nefesh adam Yisrael. Says Rabbeinu Rambam, anyone who kills a human being who is Jewish, by the way, it does not come to exclude non-Jews. Rather, there are separate halachot. For example, when we go to war, so we're warring against other nations, over belo ta'aseh, a person violates a biblical prohibition. Shneimar, like it says in the Torah, lo tirtzach, you shall not murder. V'im ratzach, and if a person kills bezadon, intentionally, bifnei edim, before witnesses, mitato basayif, the death penalty, one of the death penalties of the bedin, is saif. Saif is the removal of the head with a sword.
Sword, yeah.
Shneimar, like it says, nakom yinakem, mipi hashemua lamdu shezo mitat saif. We learned Chacham after Chacham until Moshe Rabbeinu, that means with a sword. בין שהרג את חברו בברזל, בין ששרפו באש, מיתתו בסייף. It doesn't matter how he killed him, but the death penalty is that. We then have a concept of a goel hadam. The goel hadam is who?
I cannot hear you, Rabbi.
The Redeemer.
You can't. Can anyone else hear me?
No, we can hear you.
I can't hear you, Rabbi.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Now I can, yeah.
A goel hadam is a person who's a family member who's coming to...
Murdered one.
He's the family member of the murdered one. I want to skip these halachot. Right now I don't have time for this. Go with me to halacha 4. Umuzharin bedin. And the bedin are warned or cautioned shelo likach kofer min harotzeach. Not to take kofer. What is kofer?
Payment
Payment for what?
for the hostage or the one that needs to be killed.
Okay. I mean, don't take some kind of money from the murderer. Vafilu natan kol mamon shebaolam. Even if the murderer is willing to pay all the money in the world to get off the hook. Vafilu ratza goel hadam lefatro. And even if the goel hadam, the family member says, listen, I don't want to press charges. She'en nafsho shel ze haneherag kinyan goel hadam. Listen to these words. Because the person who was murdered is not the property of the family member who survives. Ela kinyan hakadosh baruch hu. The soul of this person was given directly by HaKadosh Baruch Hu and returns directly to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. See the laws of Yisodei Torah there. And therefore, it's not the property or not the right of the Goel Hadam to say, it's okay, we're not pressing charges. It's not about you. It's about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shneimar, v'lo tikchu kofer lenefesh rotzeach. You cannot take, there it says chofer, for the soul of a murderer. Ve'en lecha davar she'ikpida Torah alav k'shfichut damim. There's nothing that the Torah cares more about than the spilling of blood. Murder. Shneimar legetzez v'lo tachanifu et haaretz. Ki hadam hu yachanif et haaretz. It's a pasuk. The pasuk tells us lo tachnifu, meaning lo tarshi'u. You should not make the world an evil place. What makes the world an evil place? When people murder each other, that makes the world an evil place. You see that sentence? There's nothing the Torah is more particular about than other people's lives. And part of this is because every person is the property of the creator of the universe. Nobody else's. All right, now that you know this, there's all kinds of qualifications here, what a person has to do in order to be guilty of murder, the witnesses, the warnings, all those kind of halachot. Right now, we're going to skip them. Come look with me in chapter 2 of the same section. So the laws of murders, but chapter 2, Perek Sheni. And if you're in Sefaria, you want to click the down arrow on top. If you don't own a hard copy of Mishneh Torah in your life, now it's time to own a Mishneh Torah in your life. I don't know how else to say. For those of you who can handle the Hebrew, there's some beautiful sets in Hebrew. For those of you who need Hebrew and English, there's some very expensive sets, only one that I know of, in Hebrew and English. But it's the kind of thing that it's worth investing. If you're going to study Mishneh Torah every day for the next year, then about $2 a day you can buy yourself a Mishneh Torah. Think about how much money you spend on coffee at Starbucks or wherever else you go, Pete's Coffee, whatever else you like. For $2 a day, everybody can afford a Rambam. In the second chapter, you see where I am in the second chapter? Yes. Kol hahoreg chavero biyado. Anyone who murders someone else, chavero, his friend, is translated meaning a fellow human being, with their hands. What does it mean with their hands? The direct action they took. Kagon, for example, shehikahu b'saif, he hits him with a sword. O be'even hamemita, or with a stone, a rock that has in it the capability to kill. What does it mean, a stone that has the capacity to kill?
Either heavy or sharp or both.
Yeah, if you look in the 3rd chapter of the same section, that when a person hits another person with an object, part of the job of the Bedin is to figure out whether or not that object had the capacity to kill the person or not. But in American law, you have something similar, which a person claims self-defense because they were attacked in a certain way. Let's just say that if a 6'4" bodybuilder gets attacked by some 4.5-foot homeless guy who's drunk and weak, it's hard to make an argument, I feared for my life. Whereas perhaps if a person was an elderly person, they were had a health condition, they were a stroke victim, and they felt that their life was threatened by such a person, then there would be a different argument, because you evaluate the situation, what is considered a life-threatening situation based on everyone and everything that is involved. But let's just say it's a stone that could kill somebody. Oftentimes in Israel, the news say, young Arabs threw stones at an Israeli car. And they make it sound like, and then the Israelis came and shot them. I don't know if there was a court case here, mamash here, a year or two ago, of these teenagers after school. They went on a bridge over the freeway. It might have even been in California. Maybe, I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly where it happened. They were standing on a bridge, and they thought it was fun to drop rocks on cars that were driving under the bridge. Now, if you're driving 65, 70 miles an hour, and a stone falls on your windshield, chas v'shalom, that's instant death for a person. The kids thought, it was so fun, we were breaking people's windows. It's not fun breaking people's windows. There's no difference in a person standing on the bridge with a gun shooting at people that are driving their cars. So we're talking about a stone, a rock that has the capacity to kill. O shechanako ad shemet, or he strangles the person until they die. O serafo ba'esh, or he burns them in fire, like a Hasidic Rebbe in New York who tried to burn one of his Hasidim's family with fire. You're familiar with the story? You can Google it afterwards. Ho'il v'harago mikol makom hu be'atzmo, harei ze neherag b'vedin. Because this person at the end of the day killed him with his own strength, his own power, then he is liable for death in the Bedin. Aval, but. So any person who kills somebody else through a direct action, this person is guilty of murder and the Bedin can kill him. Aval socher horeg laharog et chavero. But if a person hires someone to kill their friend, they hire a hitman. By the way, unfortunately, this happens more often than you might think. Put it in the news. How many husbands or wives have hired someone to kill their spouse? Because they don't want to get divorced from them, because they want life insurance policy, because A, B, C, D, E. Crazy stories. Here in this country. I'm not talking to you about some place with no... Here. Someone hires someone to kill somebody for them. We have a rule in halakha. En shaliach. Someone know the rule?
En shaliach lidvar avera.
Very good. There is no such thing as a messenger for doing an avira. Let's explain. Yesh shaliach lidvar mitzvah. Give me an example of you can make a shaliach, you can appoint a messenger to do a mitzvah for you. Give me an example. An example.
That's Isha.
Okay, that's a complicated example. Let's skip the complicated. Give me something simple. That's a good example. By the way, in the laws of making shlichim, so for sure, lekadesh isha is going to be one of them. I'm trying to think of an example that someone here probably did or would do in their life.
Buying property with the real estate agent.
Who said kiddush and who said... Okay, buying property, yes, but let's talk about a mitzvah. Yitzchak, tell me a mitzvah you just said.
A mohel.
You can make kiddush for somebody else.
Okay, kiddush, milah. You know, I like the idea of milah. Forgive me, I was going to say kiddush actually, but let's say milah. When one of my sons were born, I was looking for a mohel. I called the mohel and said, listen, you're a rabbi. Why don't I do this? I'm going to set up the whole thing and you'll do the brit milah. I said, you're crazy. If I knew how to do a brit milah on my own, I would do it on my own. Because I don't know how to do it, I want to hire you. I don't want you to help me do a brit milah. You know, it says, Urevanim levanecha, shalom al Israel.
That's a mitzvah.
So, yeah, it's also a mitzvah not to hurt anybody. So, what do? You appoint the mohel, but we say this. I'm appointing you, the mohel, as my shaliach, to fulfill the mitzvah that I have to circumcise my son. How can someone do a mitzvah for me? Kiddush, you go to someone's house, and the person says kiddush. By the way, a shaliach can only do a mitzvah for you if they do the mitzvah properly. I cannot tell you how many times you go to someone's house and they do kiddush for you, but the person is an am haaretz. What is an am haaretz? A lot of amei haaretz. What is an am haaretz? Somebody who doesn't learn Torah. You're here in the shiur, it's a chazakah on you that you're not an am haaretz. But other people, they're religious. That's what they call themselves. They don't know anything about their religion, but they're religious. Hebrew, they don't know how to read. Which kind of wine, they don't know how to use. How to drink from the cup fast enough after they say the bracha, they don't know. They start pouring out wine to everybody, they start talking, they start singing. All of that means, by the way, simplest, they don't have you in mind. They don't even know what it means to say kiddush for you. There are so many ways in which you should make sure to do the mitzvah of kiddush properly, and only have people say kiddush for you if they know how to properly do the mitzvah. But a kiddush is a great example. You go to a Shabbat table, everyone's going to make their own kiddush. I've been to tables like that too, by the way. Everybody makes their own kiddush. Why? Why do you ever have to recite their own kiddush? It's a beautiful thing when Jewish people do mitzvot together. But you say, I'm appointing you to fulfill my mitzvah of kiddush. And it's not even so much shlichut, it's more of shomea keoneh. Over there, it's more of a situation of you're hearing something, so it's like you're saying something. Brit milah is a great example. A great example. You can appoint someone to do a mitzvah for you. According to our Chachamim, you cannot appoint someone to do an averah for you. Meaning, they're going to be guilty of the averah. They can't say, oh, he sent me to do it. So we know that the hitman, is he a murderer?
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Is the one who sent the hitman a murderer?
He's obliged. He sent him.
Well, that's what we're coming to find out. O sheshalach avadav. Or he sends one of his slaves, his workers, v'haraguhu, and he kills him. Or shekafat chavero, he ties up his friend, v'hinicho lifnei ha'ari, and he conveniently leaves him next to a lion. What's going to happen to the friend? He'll be eaten. V'chayotzebo, or anything else that's like this. It doesn't have to be one of these exact stories. V'haragto ha'chaya, and the animal kills him. V'chen, and also ha'horeg et atzmo, somebody who kills himself. I'm sure that you know that we have in halakha certain sensitivities towards suicide victims and people who've struggled with their mental health. And I'm certain that you know that I'm in this shiur, I'm not at all chas v'shalom picking on such a person. And I think anyone who knows us knows that, and anyone who knows my wife's area of research knows that this is one of her areas of primary focus and concern. Yeah, but here I'm reading the halakha, I'm trying to explain the halakha in a dry context, and ask that no one get hurt from it. Or a person who kills themselves. Now, what difference does it make if a person who kills themselves is guilty of murder or not?
As to whether his blood needs to be redeemed?
Okay, so there could be some practical ramifications. Does a person mourn for them? What if a person attempted to do such a thing? But no. Kol echad me'elu, every one of these people, shofech damim hu, is a murderer. Va'avon hariga biyado, and the sin of killing is in their hands. V'chayav mita l'shamayim, this is the answer to my previous question. And they are liable to be punished by a heavenly court. You see, when a person is executed by an earthly court, we understand that the execution that happens here is a kapara. What does it mean, a kapara? It atones for their sin. Kind of like when a person says, I went to prison, I served my time. Society should view me as a person who, I did something wrong, but I also fixed it. The same way in halakha we view a person who served their time, meaning they were executed. They accepted upon themselves that the only way to do teshuvah for their actions is a very difficult thing. I mean, the concept is very heartbreaking. The only way to fix what they have wronged is to cease being alive. And so that itself is a kapara. When we say that a person is chayav mita bidei shamayim, that only the heavenly court can kill him, it means that he's not able to get a kapara here. We don't have the tools. Killing him in this world wouldn't give us the ability to give him a kapara. If you want to see more about this, you can see the Rambam in his commentary on the Mishnayot, Sanhedrin chapter 9. Ve'en behen mitat bedin. Nonetheless, these people do not have a mitat bedin. They're not able to be killed in an earthly court. Uminayin sheken hu adin. So these are the proof texts to this pasuk, to these halachot. Let's look in halakha daled. Uvchol elu haratzchanin. And in the case of all these murderers, vechayotze behen. What is kayotze behen? Anybody else who can be included in this category. I'm going to read this whole sentence, and then I'm going to go back and take apart the words together with you. Sheinan mechuyavin mitat bedin, that are not liable to be executed by an earthly court. Im ratza melech Yisrael lehorgan bedin hamalchut v'takanat ha'olam, if the king wishes to execute them, why? Because of the law of his government and in order to fix the world or society. Hareshut biado, the king is allowed to execute people who chachamim are not allowed to execute. V'chen also, im ra'u bedin laharog otan behora'at sha'ah. If the bedin feels, listen, we need to execute this person for a temporary reason, meaning we're not changing halakha now that we execute people without due process according to the Torah, but we feel that if we do not execute this person, chaos will prevail. People will think you can get away with murder. Im hayta hasha'at tzaricha lechach. If times, the generation, if the factors that exist in the world demand such a thing, hare yesh lehem reshut kefi ma shiru. The bedin has permission to do whatever they feel they need to do. What's the halakha we just read? According to the Torah, there are certain people that are not liable to be killed. We don't have the right ducks lined up in a row to kill them. So who can swoop in and execute these people? Two different groups. First group, the king, or anyone deputized by the king, I'm adding that in parentheses. They are able to execute for the reasons of either their law, meaning, what did he say? The laws of the kingdom. Which laws of the kingdom? Doesn't the kingdom follow the Torah? That's exactly what we spoke about last week, and we've spoken about previously. There is another legal system that is there to fill in the blanks or the voids in Jewish civil law. The king's law. If, according to the king's law, this person is liable for the death penalty, the king and his courts can kill them. Or, if the bedin, this is the rabbinic court, feels that by letting this person off the hook, there will be a terrible breach in society and the way things work, then the bedin is allowed to take whatever measure, execute them, and whatever means the bedin feels is required. They cannot, it's hora'at sha'ah, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, but hora'at sha'ah, let's just say temporarily, means they're not changing halakha for good. They're not saying that for good we don't need witnesses, or forever we're not going to follow this process. But in this particular case, the bedin has reached the conclusion that this is what is required to be done. My purpose of reading these halachot to you is to show you that Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is not imagining some other legal system that exists in the Jewish people out of his own. It's something that exists in the text. And the fact that other people don't speak about it just means that they're either not well educated or have not picked up on the nuance or the subtlety that is found inside of the text. And so I wish to go back with you to a few words. If you could open with me the Laws of Kings, chapter 3. And if you are comfortable jumping around in Mishneh Torah, then please do. And if you can't find them, then you can just listen and I'll read these halachot for you. But it would be great if you have the energy or the ability to jump around either in Sefaria or in a hard copy volume that you have in front of you. Says the Rambam in the 10th, the last halakha, in the 3rd chapter of the Laws of Kings. Kol hahorgin nefashot, all those who murder souls, meaning murderers. Shelo biraya berua, o belo hatra'ah, and they do that without clear witnesses, meaning, if you look in the Laws of Witnesses, chapter 4 there, the Rambam mentions, for example, that 2 witnesses saw the same thing, but they saw them separately. Or belo hatra'ah, or without warning. The Rambam in the Laws of Sanhedrin, chapter 12, explains what does it mean, warnings. What are warnings? You have to tell the person, you know you are about to commit a crime, and this crime will bring with it the death penalty. The person says, I don't care if I get killed, I want to kill him too. That's being warned, and the person accepting already upon themselves the consequence that if they kill, they will be executed. Afilu be'ed echad, says Rabbeinu Rambam, even if you have one witness. O soneh sheharag bishgaga. A soneh is someone who hates somebody, who kills them bishgaga, by accident. Now, usually a person who kills someone by accident, unintentionally, where do they go? What's the process that they go through? They run away to an ir miklat, a city of refuge. This person is not, he's not a candidate for the ir miklat. The reason he's not a candidate is because he's considered a soneh. A soneh, the halachic category of a soneh, I'm going to jump with you. You're okay jumping with me around a little bit in the Mishneh Torah? If you go back to the laws of murder, the Rambam says the following. HaSoneh, the 6th chapter of the laws of murderers, halakha 10. Someone who is a hater, sheharag bishgaga, who killed unintentionally, eno niklat, he's not absorbed into the city of refuge. Meaning, the city of refuge is a type of galut. The type of galut, as the Rambam explains in the commentary in the Mishnah on Makot, the type of galut that a person goes to may also be considered a kapara, may also be an atonement. This person's crime is too severe that galut alone to a city of refuge should atone for him. Shneimar, like it says, v'hu lo oyev lo, cheskato shu karov lemezid. This person is almost an intentional killer because he hated him. So even though the killing happened unintentionally, but there was already premeditation there in some way which causes him to be guilty. Ve'ezehu soneh, what is the halachic definition of a person who's considered a hater? Somebody who hates someone else, who's not able to go to a city of refuge. Zeh shelo diber imo shelosha yamim mipenei eva ha'eva. This is a person who has not spoken to their friend for more than 3 days. By the way, are there any people here that have not spoken to me in the last week? Of course. Almost everybody here. But the reason you didn't speak with me is not because you hate me, hopefully. Maybe that's the reason you have your camera off, but not the reason why you hate me. Mipnei ha'eva, the eva is that I didn't speak to this person because I'm fighting with them, because I hate them, because I'm mad at them. That's eva. So the lack of communication for 3 days is not enough. I love the subtle hints. The lack of communication on its own is not enough, but lack of communication together with hatred is what makes someone considered a soneh. So this person is not absorbed into an ir miklat. Back to the halachot that we were studying. The Rambam says, so such a person, yesh lamelech reshut, I'm back in the Laws of Kings, chapter 3, halakha 10. The king has permission laharogotan, to kill them. Ultaken ha'olam kefi ma she'asha'a tzaricha. He can fix the world by killing this person, not as an actual law that violates the Torah, but because the times call for this person to be executed. And the king has some more power. Vehoreg rabim biyom echad. He can kill many people in one day. Why not? Why would he not be able to kill many people in one day? No, you guys know some Torah, no? Why could he possibly not kill many people in one day?
Does he would lose his sensitivity for what he's doing?
Okay, then are you familiar with any Torah law that limits the amount of people you can kill?
You mean kill actually with your own hands?
No, I'm talking about a bedin, executing people.
Oh.
Isn't there some law on how many people a Beit Din can put to death per...
That's exactly what I'm asking.
Isn't it like one per every...
I see that we need to review some Torah together. Let's turn to the 14th chapter of the Laws of Sanhedrin. You're going to get good at clicking the Safari tab. So you want to find Sanhedrin, chapter 14. Says the Rambam, צריכין בדין להתיישב בדיני נפשות ולהמתין. It's the obligation of the bedin to wait, to weigh heavily matters that have to do with killing people, execution. ולא יאיצו. What does it mean, יאיץ? One of my Hebrew speakers.
Not to rush things.
Not to rush to judgment. You don't want to...
But aren't you talking about... You were talking about the king, though.
Yeah, now I'm jumping to bedin.
Okay.
Yeah, Rachel's right. I was now talking about the king. Currently, I'm talking about the bedin. V'chol bedin shehargu nefesh b'sheva shanim. And any bedin which kills a person, one person, in 7 years, הרי אלו חבלנין. What is a chablanin? What is a mechabel? Don't say terrorists. Why do we call terrorists mechablim? What do they do? What's the action?
They damage or destroy.
Very good. Damagers. Literally that. Damagers or destroyers. So a bedin that executes someone more than once every 7 years is considered a damaging bedin, a destructive bedin. ואף על פי כן, nonetheless, אם אירע להן להרוג בכל יום ויום, if it happens that every day they have to execute somebody because that's just the situation society's in, הורגים. That's what they do. They kill people as often as they need. So the idea here that we understand is that the bedin is supposed to fulfill the verse which says, the teaching, hevu metunim badin, that you have to be slow to judgment, not to rush to execute people, to kill people all day long, you're cutting people's heads off, it's not the way that a bedin should operate. But if it happens to be that you're dealing in a generation where there are that many people who are guilty, so the batei din are able to execute as many people as they need. But, אבל אין דנין לעולם שניים ביום אחד. But you can never execute two people in one day. אלא דנין זה היום, והשני למחר. Rather, you do one today and one tomorrow. The exception to that rule would be if they're both guilty of the same crime. And the penalty is the same. So if they're both guilty of a crime they did together, but their crimes are, the consequence for their crimes are different, then they also have to be separate days. But if it's two people who committed the same crime together and they're guilty of the same penalty, then they can be executed together. But aside from that, we don't kill more than one person every day. And the whole purpose of these halachot is to cause the bedin to slow down. Maybe if you wait a day, you'll find a reason to exonerate them. If you wait a day, maybe more evidence will come to light. If you wait a week because you have 7 people lined up, maybe there'll be time for someone to make a good argument to not execute this person. And therefore the Batei Din are urged not to rush in matters of other people's lives, of execution. That explains now why the Rambam is so quick to point out that a king doesn't have to follow those rules. Because the king's whole reason for killing is a temporary fix, or even a fix where the rabbis are not empowered to do so, in order to make sure that society doesn't fall apart. Yeah, does that make sense to you? Okay. Now that you know that,
yeah, we have one critical example for this rule.
yes?
When remember that there was Kamsa Bar Kamsa,
Yeah.
he went and he offered to sacrifice, and they say if we kill him because of that, so the rabbi debated to kill him, not to kill him, decided not to kill him, and because of lack of killing him, there was destruction of the temple.
Very good. You're familiar with the story my father mentioned from Masechet Gitin. In Tractate Gitin, there was a whole story there, in the short version, that the man was going to go speak to the Roman government, and the Bedin was debate, should we kill him, not kill him? The answer is they should have been more deliberate in judgment, and because they weren't, so we paid a very high price for that. Now, part of the halachot of execution is that after we execute someone, these are not comfortable halachot. None of these halachot are comfortable. But courts here kill people also all the time. You just don't talk about it. Part of the laws of execution are, look in chapter 15 of the Rambam's Laws of Sanhedrin, Halakha 6. מצוות עשה, לתלות את המגדף ועובד עבודה זרה, שנאמר כי קהילת אלוהים תלוי. There's a mitzvah that after the Bedin executes certain people, to hang them in public. Not hanging by their neck, hanging on display. It's quite a morbid sight. Ketzad mitzvat hanitlin. Okay, how do they do it? They hang them. Tole oto samuch l'shkiat hachama, immediately before sunset. Umatirin oto miyad, and immediately they take the person's body down. They don't want to hang a body there. Do it as quickly as they can to fulfill this mitzvah. V'im lan, and if they leave the body there, Ovrin alav belo ta'aseh. They violate a biblical prohibition, shneimar, lo talin nivlato al ha'etz. You're not allowed to leave a body that's executed hanging on the tree. ומצוות עשה, לקבור את כל הרוגי בדין ביום ההריגה, shneimar, כי קבור תקברנו ביום ההוא. And we have an obligation immediately after this, that on the same day that a person is executed, we bury them. They still have the right, they deserve burial. Now, that's why the Rambam in the Laws of Kings, chapter 3, says, V'toleh u'manichan tilu'in yamim rabim. That the king is also able to hang a person for many days. He can completely disregard these laws that are given to the Sanhedrin. What's the purpose of the king being able to execute more than one person a day? Or to violate the laws of burial and allow them to be hung? Look what the Rambam says. Lehatil ema v'lishbor yad rish'ei ha'olam. To instill fear into the people, the criminals, and to break the hands of the evil people in the world. I mean, what's the purpose that the king is able to bypass the Torah's prohibitions here? Because it's his job to make sure that society is not overrun by criminals who are using the Torah to get away with murder. The whole purpose of this section of halakha is again to show you that just because we mentioned last week all the limitations that a bedin would have to provide order to society, does not mean that there is no way to restore that order through other methods, one of them being civil courts. That's the purpose of studying these areas of halakha together. Go back with me.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
I don't know if this is dumb.
There's no such thing as a dumb question.
When you refer to the Beit Din, are you referring to the Sanhedrin on all of these accords, or are you talking about the Beit Din of 3?
Oh boy. You asked the big questions now, or you want to leave the big questions for later?
That's the bit. What did you say?
That's a big question. Let's say for right now, let's assume for right now that the Rambam is talking about the Bedin Hagadol. Okay, let's assume that's what he's talking about. Yeah? Not any Bedin, but the Bedin Hagadol. We're going to challenge that assertion later. But for right now, let's work with, we're talking about a national court of Israel. Can we go with that?
So you're talking like 71.
Okay, fine. Sanhedrin. Okay, Sanhedrin. Fine. Let's run with it. I might make a U-turn on you later, but for right now, I'm willing to run with it. Let's go back to the Rambam in the Laws of Murder, chapter 2. Okay, let's look at the next section of halakha. Halakha Hey. הרי שלא הרגם המלך ולא הייתה שעה צריכה לחזק הדבר. If there's a situation where there's such a criminal who we're not able to actually execute because the law doesn't allow for us to do it, and in addition, it doesn't fall into the category of people that the king would kill, or the generation doesn't have this problem that you really need to scare all the murderers away, so what should you do with this criminal? הרי בדין חייבים מכל מקום. The bedin has an obligation nonetheless להכותם מכה רבה הקרובה למיתה. To beat them, מכה רבה, that's tremendous blows. And why it's an individual, you can look in the book of Devarim, chapter 25, in the singular as opposed to the plural. הקרובה למיתה, something that like almost he'll die from. ולאסור אותם במצור ובמצוק שנים רבות. And the bedin can put them in prison, not regular prison, not bad prison, for many years. Now, I know you and I have discussed prisons, and we will discuss at length prisons in halakha. Again, I'm going to remind you that in general, in halakha, there is no room for a prison system. Meaning, it is a very rare instance in where we put a person in prison. Some of those might be we're waiting until the next day in order to finish judgment or to execute a person. But for the most part, This is almost the only place in which a person is actually held in prison as a consequence for something they did wrong, and not because they're awaiting judgment or because they're awaiting execution. This is a very rare instance. Do not learn from this halakha that every criminal we throw in prison. We imprison them b'matzor u'v'matzok shanim rabot. Matzor is prison. What is matzok?
Like a tzinook, like tzinook, like an underground dungeon or something.
No, that's here. Matzok. Matzok is to starve them here. Ultzaram bechol minei tzar, and to cause them all kinds of suffering. Why? This person is a criminal. Yeah, they killed someone. They tied them up and fed them to the bears. But according to the Torah law, they're not liable to be executed. There weren't witnesses. They didn't kill them directly. According to the king's law, he doesn't have a problem of serial killers throwing people to the bears. So he doesn't feel like he needs to intervene and execute this person. So Bedin intervenes, takes the person in prison and makes them live a tormented amount of time here, כדי להפחיד ולאיים על שאר הרשעים, in order to terrify the other evildoers in the world. To use this person as an example. שלא יהיה להם הדבר לפוקע ולמכשול לבב. So that they won't think that maybe they can get away. ויאמר, and they'll say, הריני מסבב להרוג אויבי כדרך שעשה פלוני ופטר. Look, my friend hired a hitman. Look, my friend tied someone up and threw him to the crocodiles. I can get away with murder, so I'm going to kill whoever I want, but I won't be liable for the death penalty. No, Chachamim have an obligation to step up their game and to deter, almost by any means possible, and make sure that people, the criminals, don't get the wrong idea. Crime doesn't pay. If a criminal thinks that crime pays, I can get away with crime, that's going to be the worst thing that can happen to society. Again, who is responsible here? You saw the king wasn't doing it. The Bedin wasn't doing it. At a certain point, the Bedin takes action and makes sure to fill in the blanks somewhere where otherwise nobody else would get involved. If I can, let me see if there's one more Rambam that I could read to you tonight. I'm afraid to open a Pandora's box right before we finish the shiur. How about this? If you can, let me learn with you for a little bit longer. And if for whatever reason you need to go, then we'll post this recording for whoever needs to catch up. But if you can, let's please learn a little bit longer. I want to finish this idea, so I'm not leaving you hanging, no pun intended, for until next week. Yes? Look with me in the laws of Mamrim. I don't even know how they translate the laws of Mamrim into English. It's going to be in the book of Shoftim. So if you look in the book of Shoftim, what do they call the chapter between the laws of witnesses and laws of mourning? Anybody with me on Sefaria? Or Yochanan, what do they have in the English Mishneh Torah you just took down?
Between
witnesses or testimony and mourning. In the book of Shoftim.
Yeah.
So after Sanhedrin, after witnesses.
Yeah.
What are they trying?
Melachim u milchot.
Okay, one before that, there's mourning, and then one before that.
Hilchot Eber.
Okay, and before that.
ממרים,
Do they translate that?
רק שנייה.
אוקיי. איזה יופי, מדבר עברית. יוחנן, כל הכבוד.
It says
Oh yeah, laws of rebellious ones.
Rebellious ones, thank you. Okay, that's a good title. So let's look at the second chapter of the laws of Mamrim. This is a really complicated chapter of the Mishnah Torah, and I highly suggest you look through it on your own, but you must do it with a commentary or something that will guide you, because you can very easily get lost in this section. Let's look in halakha number 4. The Rambam here is explaining to us about laws that are made, rabbinic laws that are made, which Batei Din can uproot rulings of previous Batei Din. Do they have to be greater than them b'minyan, with numbers, greater than them b'chokhmah, in wisdom? Do they have to, are they able to get rid of previous rulings? Are they not? This is the whole chapter about this. Let's look at halakha number 4. V'yesh levedin. And here we're talking specifically, Alex, about the Bedin Hagadol. So this is specifically the Supreme Court. V'yesh levedin la'akor af devarim elu lefi sha'a. And there are things that the Bedin is able to uproot temporarily. Af al pi shu katan min rishonim, even though he's smaller than the other, is of a lesser status than the other Batei Din who came before. שלא יהיו גזרות אלו חמורים מדברי תורה עצמה, שאפילו דברי תורה יש לכל בית דין לעקור אותן הוראת שעה. The Bedin is able to uproot previous rabbinic laws temporarily, not forever, in a place where they feel there's a need for that, because it cannot be that the words of our rabbis are more important or more severe than the words of the Torah. And we know that the Supreme Court of Israel is able to uproot words from the Torah temporarily, not regularly, temporarily, in order to preserve order in society. Didn't you know that halakha? The Bedin is able to suspend Torah law if it feels the need to do so. The Rambam says that this is the only way to preserve society, that the Bedin has to have, you remember there was a San Bernardino killer. Do you remember that happened here in California? And the FBI wanted access to the guy's iPhone, but Apple didn't want to give them access to the iPhone. Nobody, please Apple, don't sue me, neither the FBI. I don't remember the details exactly. What ended up happening was the FBI wanted some kind of back door to get into the iPhone. The whole story is that sometimes, even in every society that has rules, there have to be ways to circumvent those rules for the greater good. Now, is this a dangerous thing? Absolutely dangerous. It's a very dangerous conversation to have. And that's why we don't have it with everybody. That's why only the Supreme Court is allowed to do these things. But someone has to be able to say, Chevre, right now, this law of the Torah is damaging the people. This law of the Torah is not good enough for the people. This law of the Torah needs to be, it's not a challenge of the Torah. It's a problem that is in society right now. Torah, Hashem, Temimah, Meshivat Nafesh. Torah is beautiful. But for whatever reason, there's a fluke in society right now. And there's something that has to be temporarily altered or temporarily suspended. And that's the task of the Bedin Hagadol. It's a very scary area of halakha. Ketzad, for example, how does it happen? Bedin שראו לחזק הדת ולעשות סייג כדי שלא יעברו העם על התורה. If the Bedin feels that there's a certain area of halakha that people are violating, and they feel they have to make it even more severe so people don't violate the actual Torah. Makin shelo kadin ve'onshin shelo kadin. The Bedin is allowed to beat people and punish people even though the law does not allow for that. The one thing that Bedin is not allowed to do, there's a biblical prohibition of Bal Tosif. You're not allowed to add to the Torah. And therefore, what does it mean to add to the Torah? Is if the Sanhedrin makes a new law for the Torah. But if it says temporarily, we see that people are very lax in that area of life. We're going to enforce it in a very severe fashion. The Bedin has the right to enforce the law more than what the Torah requires. And that goes in the other direction also. So I'm sure that you and I are familiar with all kinds of communities who feel they have to go very strict in one direction because if not, A, B, C, D. Look at the next halakha. וכן, אם ראו לפי שעה לבטל מצוות עשה, if they felt temporarily that it's proper to undo one of the biblical commandments. Let that sink in for a moment. Or la'avor al mitzvat lo ta'aseh, or to violate one of the biblical prohibitions. Kedei lahachazir rabim ladat, in order to bring multitudes back to the faith. Or lehatzid rabim miYisrael milikashel bidvarim achirim, or in order to save the Jews from doing things wrong in other areas. Osin, the Bedin is allowed to do that, lefi ma she'hasha'ah tzaricha, and all of it is dependent on whatever that time calls for. Desperate times call for desperate measures. The greatest example of this, I'm jumping around a little bit more. Mishneh Torah, the laws of foundations of Torah. So it's going to be in the book of Mada. An example here. Rambam in the 9th chapter of Yisodei Torah, Halacha 3. The Rambam says, Kigon Eliyahu b'Har Karmel. Eliyahu the prophet was on Mount Carmel. Can someone tell me the biblical story? What is Eliyahu HaNavi doing on Har Carmel? Why is he there?
He's sacrificing when the law was that you sacrifice all in Yerushalayim.
Wait, don't tell me what he was doing wrong. Tell me why he was there.
He's challenging the prophets of Baal.
So the Jewish people were running after an idol called Baal. This is a very popular theme in this time period in history. And Eliyahu HaNavi comes to challenge the Nevi'ei HaBaal, the prophets of Baal that are over there on Har Carmel. My family lives all around Har Carmel. That's the mountain that overlooks the Haifa area. It's a famous mountain in Israel. Rachel, tell me what was the problem? He was challenging them by offering a sacrifice. So what? He's allowed to offer a sacrifice. What was the problem?
What I'm saying, I think that at that time there were no bamot around Israel.
Oh.
But he offered to sacrifice, to challenge them to sacrifice, to see whose sacrifice Hashem will accept. But the point is that he changed the law by sacrificing
outside of Yerushalayim. Very good. So at that point in time already there was a law that you're not allowed to offer sacrifices outside of the Beit HaMikdash. So here he writes, the Rambam, Kegon Eliyahu bar Carmel. Eliyahu HaNavi on Mount Carmel. Sheikriv olah b'chutz. That he offered a sacrifice of an olah offering outside of the Beit HaMikdash. U'v'Yerushalayim nivchara. And Yerushalayim was the one that was chosen to be the place that a Kadosh Baruch Hu is going to accept offerings from. Look in the Laws of Sacrifices, chapter 18, over there. V'makriv b'chutz chayav karet. And we know that somebody who offers a sacrifice outside of the Beit HaMikdash in Yerushalayim is liable for karet, the consequence of being cut off. Umipnei shehu navi. But because he was a prophet, mitzvah lishmo'a lo. It was a mitzvah to listen to him. V'gam bazeh ne'emar, that's also what it means, elav tishma'un in the Torah, devarim, that you must listen to him. Meaning that temporarily the Navi also has the same power as the Bedin Hagadol in certain ways, that he is able to temporarily suspend. He didn't say that now we're all sacrificing offerings in Mount Har Carmel. He didn't say we're shutting down the Beit HaMikdash or relocating it to Haifa. He didn't say he likes the view of the ocean and that helps him meditate better when he sacrifices. He says, now for this particular case, to bring back thousands of Jews who are following Baal, I must make an offering in Haifa, in a place in Har Carmel, in a place where you're not allowed to offer sacrifices. And he was allowed to do that. And the Rambam continues one more thing. The Rambam says back in the laws of Mamrim, Keshem sheharofeh chotech yedo or raglo shel hazeh kedei sheyichyeh kulo. Just the same way that a doctor cuts off someone's arm or their leg in order to save his whole body. Kach bedin morin bizman min hazmanim לעבור על מקצת מצוות לפי שעה. The Bedin also, as doctors of Jewish society, have the power to authorize the violation of certain mitzvot. Not all the mitzvot, certain mitzvot. A minority of the mitzvot. Temporarily, not forever. Kedei shitkaimu kulan. In order so that you can keep all of the mitzvot. Eventually. Kederech she'amu chachamim harishonim. And when it says kederech, is borrowing. It's not identical, but it's very similar to the area in halakha which our early rabbis already taught us. Chalel alav Shabbat achat. When you see someone's life in danger on Shabbat, you violate the Shabbat in order to save their life. Kedei shishmor Shabbatot harbe. In order so that he may observe many more Shabbatot. We violate Shabbat now in order to make sure that this person can keep many more Shabbatot. There are times where the Bedin says the right thing for the Jewish people to do now is to violate this mitzvah so that in 1 year from now, or in 10 years from now, or in 6 months from now, we will be able to observe the Torah fully. Now, who can play that game? Very specific individuals, very specific institutions in the Jewish people. Not every person, not everybody, but every Bedin HaGadol. Likely the prophets of Israel. What does it mean a prophet of Israel? Someone who is authorized by the Bedin HaGadol as a prophet of Israel. Not every person who dreams is a prophet. And this is necessary in order to have a society that functions. I didn't have a chance to post homework in the Google Classroom. But where I want to leave you off, I want you actually to study this area of the laws of Shabbat. In which we violate Shabbat in order to save a person's life. And I want you to find me a few, perhaps, exceptions here. Exceptions of, if we're supposed to save a person's life so they can keep many more Shabbatot, then why am I able to save the life of person A or person B or person C? I wanted to talk about that already next week, but B'ezrat Hashem, I will post that homework later tonight when I get back to my computer in the Google Classroom. For right now, I think it's crucial to understand that I'm setting up here a case according to Rabbi Chaim David Halevy to show that there is no such thing as Judaism, at least rabbinic Judaism, that is out of touch with the needs of society because there is some halakha, biblical, rabbinic, or otherwise, that would preclude us from fixing society or solving problems that we feel we need fixed or solved. And that halakha is much more, I'm going to borrow words, forgive me, fluid and flexible than other people might actually think. And that the rigidity that some people wish for us to observe Torah with is exactly why we see that there is no leadership in Am Yisrael that is able to say, wow, we have a plan for the future of the Jewish people. Because some of the plan of the future of the Jewish people is going to require a very deep understanding of how the system of national law works. And part of that might mean that we have to enforce things that previously we didn't enforce, or to stop enforcing things temporarily that previously we did enforce. Things that only a group of people like the Bedin HaGadol, who are qualified to understand and really feel the problems that Am Yisrael is dealing with. For right now, I'm going to leave us off here. B'ezrat Hashem, we're going to continue this next week. We are nowhere near done exploring this topic, not as it relates to murderers, not as it relates to financial crime, but B'ezrat Hashem, next week we're going to start off a little bit, for just a moment, with the laws of Shabbat, God willing. Thank you so much for learning with me tonight, and B'ezrat Hashem, I will see you either next week or at the class tomorrow evening.